a Jedi who made the ultimate sacrifice, a Vulcan who made movie history, and a daring death scene that wiped out an entire franchise. Keep watching for the most controversial deaths in sci-fi movie history. Easily the most contentious of the 9 films in the Skywalker saga, The Last Jedi saw jaded Luke Skywalker finally buy the moisture farm and shuffle off the mortal coil. Luke's death divides neatly into 2 schools of thought among fans. There are those who believe Luke should have died a more ostensibly heroic death, perhaps in the midst of some huge lightsaber battle. There are also those who believe his death was completely becoming of the Jedi Code, and that he gave his life through an act of non-violence, buying time for the Resistance and allowing his friends to escape. Having carried out the Force illusion he knew was pushing the limits of his powers, Luke's body on Actos simply fades away, allowing his spirit to become one with the Force. Luke's fate may have been controversial, but you can't say it's not memorable. Logan is more of a Western than a superhero movie, though it certainly got some sci-fi credentials too, considering the X-Men franchise boasts a number of aliens and a heap of futuristic technology. Meanwhile, the Western genre holds a long tradition of portraying old and weary gunslingers who die in battle, often pursuing some form of vengeance or closure. Set in 2029, Logan finds the elderly ex-X-Man, once known as Wolverine, living in a world with few remaining mutants. Assisting a young girl with powers similar to his own, Logan finds himself with a cause worth fighting for, saving a group of mutant children from a sinister government organization. This mission cost Wolverine his life, his healing factor pushed to and beyond its limits. It's an apt fate for our hero, albeit unexpected, and leads into what is arguably the greatest and most heartbreaking ending in comic book movie history. By all rights, Captain James Tiberius Kirk should have died in a space battle with the odds against him and the situation grim. He and the Enterprise should have soared, phasers and warp drive blazing, into the Federation equivalent of Valhalla. Given the captain's nature and exemplary career, however, his actual death was a little underwhelming. In Star Trek Generations, Kirk and Picard are stranded in the Nexus, an intergalactic phenomenon that makes all your dreams come true. There, they are forced to team up against the evil scientist Soren. After a brief struggle, Kirk finds himself on a rickety metal bridge that collapses and crushes him to death. And that's about it. Talk about unbecoming. You could argue that Han Solo was lucky to live as long as he did, being a man with countless bounties on his head who was engaged in a dangerous spacefaring smuggling career. And that's not to mention his frequent dalliances with the Rebel Alliance and later the Resistance. Despite his apparent longevity and luck, fans likely felt a sense of real trepidation when, in The Force Awakens, Han approached his estranged son Ben in the chasms of Starkiller Base, to quote a sentiment oft expressed by multiple residents in the Star Wars galaxy.
I got a bad feeling about this.
I have a bad feeling about this.
I've got a bad feeling about it.
Hey. Quiet.
What?
In a move that well and truly established Han wasn't coming back, the writers had him impaled by Ben's lightsaber and hurled down a chasm. And then they blew the planet up for good measure. It arguably felt unexpected, unfair, and a far from fitting payoff for the lovable and scruffy scoundrel. Still, at least it ended up giving us one of the best moments in the rise of Skywalker. Robert Downey Jr. had been the heart of the Marvel Cinematic Universe since 2008, and the linchpin of the main Avengers team since 2012. Over the years, fans had witnessed the character's origins, the turmoil of the Marvel Civil War that turned hero against hero, and Iron Man's final confrontation with Thanos. Towards the end of Avengers Endgame, it really does seem like all is lost, with Thanos about to use the Infinity Stones to remake the entire universe. In one last defiant gesture, however, Tony Stark steals the stones and gives the Mad Titan a taste of his own medicine. With a snap of his fingers, Tony wins the day, reducing Thanos and his overwhelming forces to dust. Alas, the hero who had been there from the very beginning was also no more. Stark's death is a devastating blow to the MCU, but it is, at least, appropriately heroic. Audiences witnessed John Connor's literal conception in The Terminator, and his rise from arrogant kid to leader of the human resistance across the next few movies in the franchise. However, the opening scene of the otherwise forgettable Terminator Dark Fate sees the cybernetic legions of Skynet finally achieve their goal of nipping this troublesome time stem in the bud. The movie opens 3 years after the destruction of Skynet in Terminator 2, as John and his mother Sarah relax on a beach in Guatemala. Sadly, their vacation is interrupted by a T-800 that promptly guns down John Connor in cold blood. John's death represents a major paradigm shift for a franchise that has concentrated on John as a central character ever since 2003's Terminator 3, Rise of the Machines. However, it's hard to argue with the canonical aspects of this decision when it was all James Cameron's idea. Indeed, it is an effective way to shift the expected character dynamics in the greater franchise, and despite the rest of the film being decidedly lackluster in comparison, John is at least given one heck of a memorable death. Sadly, with Terminator Dark Fate turning out to be a relative flop, the film may well have done what Skynet never could, put an end to the Terminator franchise once and for all. There's no denying that actor Michael Rooker is a muse of sorts to James Gunn, considering he is featured in every single one of the movies Gunn has directed, and Yondu Udonta, the Ravager who kidnapped Peter Quill from Earth, could easily have been a two-dimensional villain in the Guardians of the Galaxy franchise. But Rooker makes him so much more than that. On the surface, he's a gruff cyborg with a criminal record as long as an obelisk's tentacle, but he operates under a strict code of honor, and his sentiment and sense of responsibility for the young Quill has kept his young charge alive. It could be argued that he sees himself as a father figure to Quill, which is probably for the best since his real father was this.
It broke my heart to put that tumor in her head. What?
Like most Ravagers, Yondu's actions are mostly self-serving, so it is a genuine surprise when he sacrifices himself for Quill at the end of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. It's a poignant and touching death that serves a greater purpose in the Marvel Cinematic Universe by reuniting the various disparate factions of the Ravagers. But Yondu will be missed, and many fans will lament that they'll never see more of his adventures in the MCU. The grimdark alien universe has never been the most optimistic or hopeful, but Ripley, Newt, and Hicks, a literal nuclear family, are brought together by the destruction of the terraforming plant on LV-426, were dealt a particularly cruel and ugly hand. They'd been through hell together, surviving the razor-clawed and fanged xenomorph horrors of aliens. But for what? In the opening stages of Alien 3, their jettisoned escape pods crash land into the rain-sodden, rusted beige misery of a prison colony on Fiorina 161. And Ripley is the only survivor. It's not exactly smooth sailing for anybody in this film, but this young, brave kid and her handsome, acid-scarred marine protector deserved a far less lugubrious ending. Fans of the franchise may wish to point out that there's a far more notable death at the film's climax, but as that's all partially undone by the events of Alien Resurrection, it's the deaths of Newt and Hicks that hurt the most. Here's one for you. Which endured the crueler fate? The sci-fi western series Firefly, cancelled after only a single season? Or Hoban Wash Washburn, the show's laconic and lovable pilot? Wash's heartbreaking death occurs in Serenity, the 2005 spin-off movie that acted as kind of a series finale for Firefly. After an incredible piece of piloting through a chaotic space battlefield of clashing Reaver and Alliance vessels, Wash performs nothing shy of a small miracle and safely lands the ship. Any celebrations are short-lived though, and Wash has barely taken another breath before the unthinkable happens.
I'm a leaf on the wind. Watch out.
Alan Tudyk did a marvelous job of making the character of Wash his own, being both a neat and level-headed foil to the more headstrong Mal Reynolds, and one half of a convincing relationship with his on-screen wife, Zoe. After the exhilaration and spectacle of the scene that unfolded moments before, what followed should have been celebratory, not upsetting. But poor Wash is killed instantly and given no chance to say his farewells. Worse still, the crew is immediately forced to flee, and Zoe isn't even given time to grieve. This one still stings like a rusty spear to the gut. Only two household names starred in the first Star Wars movie: Peter Cushing, who was famous for his work for the British Hammer Film Studio, and multiple Academy Award recipient Alec Guinness. It's part of a storytelling tradition and a well-used trope that the aging mentor needs to die in order to pass on responsibility to his apprentice. However, without the benefit of hindsight, it must have come as a surprise in 1977 to watch a film brave enough to kill off an actor of Alec Guinness' stature. Falling in battle against the Padawan that he failed, Obi-Wan Kenobi dies a noble and perhaps inevitable death, but it's no less shocking for that fact. The death of some movie characters are all the more profound simply because they've always been there. Leonard Nimoy's half-human, half-Vulcan character Spock had been on screen since 1966 and was as essential an element to Star Trek as Kirk and the Enterprise. Many fans had known him longer than their own friends and family, and so his death came as a devastating blow. In The Wrath of Khan, Spock employs the immutable Vulcan logic that states that the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, sacrificing himself to save the Enterprise and its crew. Having narrowly defeated Khan, it is only the actions of the loyal commander that restores the warp drive, allowing the ship to escape the deadly blast of the Genesis wave. His final scenes with Kirk are moving beyond words, reminding us that they were always more than just comrades.
I have been, and always shall be, your friend.
The death may have been undone one film later, but at the time, it was intended to be permanent, and it shows. Leonard Nimoy himself sadly died in 2015 at the age of 83, and that loss only makes the end of The Wrath of Khan that much harder to watch. Despite the best efforts of William Shakespeare, the end of War for the Planet of the Apes sees Caesar both buried and praised. Banishing any memories of the mediocre Tim Burton reboot, the three modern films in the Planet of the Apes franchise followed the exploits of Caesar. from his humble birth in a lab through to his triumphant rise to prime protector of his species. Indeed, it's a testament to Andy Serkis's incredible motion capture performance as Caesar that it's so easy to become so invested in an entirely digital character. The plot of the original 5-film series, released between 1968 and 1973, was a convoluted tale that eventually lapsed into the paradoxical realms of time travel. But the 21st Century trilogy is more grounded in reality and more emotionally engaging. We are both sympathetic towards and fascinated by Caesar's noble cause to seek freedom for his kind. And it's a bitter blow when he falls at the end. If nothing else though, he successfully leaves behind a great legacy worthy of his name.